Most people believe intelligence is measured by how quickly someone speaks, how many facts they remember, or how easily they can win an argument. But history tells a different story. The people who quietly shaped kingdoms, built lasting influence, and survived dangerous times often possessed a different kind of intelligence. They understood that knowledge alone rarely determines success. The true advantage belongs to those who understand human nature. Every conversation, every conflict, and every opportunity is influenced by emotions, hidden motives, and silent expectations. Those who fail to recognize these invisible forces spend their lives reacting to circumstances they never fully understand. Those who learn to observe them begin making decisions that appear effortless while everyone else struggles to keep up. This is the foundation of dangerous intelligence, not the desire to dominate others, but the discipline to see beyond appearances before taking action. Ideas commonly associated with Machiavelli remind us that the world rarely rewards good intentions by themselves. Honest people can be deceived. Hardworking people can be overlooked. Talented individuals can lose opportunities to those who simply understand people better. At first, this reality feels unfair, yet resisting it changes nothing. Wisdom begins when you stop expecting the world to behave according to your ideals and start understanding how it actually works. This shift is not about becoming cynical or distrusting everyone you meet. It is about replacing naive assumptions with careful observation. Instead of believing every promise, you watch for consistent actions. Instead of judging people by impressive words, you pay attention to patterns. Over time, you discover that behavior repeated under pressure reveals far more than confident speeches ever could. The first lesson of strategic intelligence is surprisingly simple. Speak less and notice more. Most people reveal themselves without realizing it. They expose their priorities through casual conversations, their fears through emotional reactions, and their ambitions through repeated choices. Those who rush to express every opinion often miss the valuable information unfolding around them. Meanwhile, the patient observer quietly collects pieces of a much larger picture. They notice who changes their principles when circumstances become difficult. They recognize who remains loyal only when it is convenient. They understand which opportunities deserve attention and which distractions should be ignored. Observation is not passive. It is preparation. Every moment spent understanding a situation before acting increases the likelihood of making wiser decisions. This habit also transforms the way you respond to conflict. Instead of reacting immediately to criticism, disappointment, or provocation, you begin asking a different question. What is really happening beneath the surface? Sometimes anger hides insecurity. Sometimes confidence hides fear. Sometimes praise is offered only to influence future decisions. By slowing down and examining motives instead of appearances, you prevent yourself from becoming trapped by emotional impulses. You remain calm while others rush into predictable reactions. That calmness is often mistaken for confidence because it demonstrates something far more valuable than quick intelligence. It reveals self-control. Yet this knowledge carries responsibility. Understanding psychology should never become an excuse to exploit people or manipulate their weaknesses. The greatest victory is not controlling someone else's behavior, but mastering your own responses. Strategic intelligence exists to protect your judgment, strengthen your resilience, and help you navigate difficult situations with clarity rather than fear. Once you stop reacting to every distraction and begin observing with patience, the world starts revealing patterns that were always there but rarely noticed. And that realization opens the door to the next lesson, where you will discover why controlling your emotions is often far more powerful than controlling any situation itself. Once you learn to observe more than you speak, another lesson becomes impossible to ignore. The greatest battles are rarely fought against other people. They are fought inside your own mind. Every decision you make is influenced by emotion before logic has a chance to speak. Fear convinces you to stay silent when opportunity appears. Anger pushes you to react before understanding the situation. Pride whispers that admitting a mistake is a sign of weakness. These invisible forces quietly shape your life, often without your awareness. Many people believe they are making rational choices, yet they are simply following emotions that appeared only seconds earlier. Strategic intelligence begins when you recognize this hidden pattern and refuse to let temporary feelings become permanent decisions. The person who masters their emotions gains an advantage that no amount of talent or luck can replace. Ideas commonly associated with Machiavelli suggest that those who cannot govern themselves will eventually be governed by circumstances or by people who understand their weaknesses. Imagine someone who becomes furious every time they receive criticism. It does not take long for others to discover that criticism controls them. A manipulative person needs only a few carefully chosen words to influence their behavior. The same is true for someone desperate for praise. Offer enough approval and they become predictable. Promise acceptance and they begin sacrificing their principles to keep it. Emotional dependence creates invisible chains, and most people never notice they are wearing them. They assume they are acting freely while their reactions are quietly being directed by outside influences they fail to recognize. The second ruthless lesson is simple but difficult to practice. Never allow another person's behavior to decide your state of mind. This does not mean pretending you have no emotions or refusing to care about people. It means choosing your response instead of surrendering it. There will always be unfair criticism, broken promises, unexpected failures, and moments of rejection. These experiences cannot always be prevented, but your reaction remains within your control. Every time you pause before responding, you create space for wisdom to replace impulse. That brief moment of reflection often determines whether you solve a problem or create a larger one. Calmness is not the absence of emotion. It is the decision to let reason guide emotion instead of the other way around. Consider two individuals facing the same setback. One immediately blames others, complains about injustice, and allows frustration to dominate every decision that follows. The other accepts disappointment without denying it, studies what happened, and searches for the lesson hidden inside the experience. Weeks later, the first person remains trapped in resentment while the second has already adapted and moved forward. Their circumstances began the same, but their outcomes became completely different because one surrendered to emotion while the other learned from it. This is why emotional discipline is often mistaken for extraordinary confidence. People admire those who remain composed because calmness communicates strength even when words are unnecessary. Developing this habit requires patience. You will not suddenly become immune to frustration or disappointment. Instead, you gradually become aware of your emotional patterns before they control your behavior. You notice when your pride wants revenge, when fear encourages hesitation, and when insecurity demands unnecessary approval. Awareness creates choice, and choice creates freedom. Over time, your emotions become trusted advisors instead of unquestioned rulers. They still provide valuable information, but they no longer dictate every action you take. As your emotional discipline grows, something remarkable begins to happen. Situations that once overwhelmed you lose much of their power. Difficult people become easier to understand, criticism becomes easier to evaluate, and uncertainty becomes less frightening. You discover that true strength has never depended on controlling the world around you. It has always depended on controlling the person within you. And once that foundation is built, you are ready for the next lesson, where silence, patience, and careful observation become the quiet weapons that separate thoughtful leaders from impulsive followers. After learning to observe carefully and master your emotions, the next lesson changes the way you deal with every person you meet. The strongest minds understand that information is one of the most valuable forms of power. Most people lose that power without even noticing. They reveal their fears, ambitions, frustrations, and future plans to anyone willing to listen. They mistake constant openness for wisdom, believing that explaining themselves earns respect. In reality, excessive explanation often creates unnecessary vulnerability. Every detail you reveal gives others another opportunity to predict your behavior, question your decisions, or influence your direction. Strategic intelligence is not built on secrecy for its own sake. It is built on understanding that not every thought deserves to be spoken, and not every listener deserves complete access to your mind. Sometimes the smartest move is simply to remain silent and let your actions speak long before your words do. Ideas commonly associated with Machiavelli remind us that influence often belongs to those who understand more than they reveal. This does not mean becoming dishonest or pretending to be someone you are not. Instead, it means recognizing that patience creates clarity. When you speak less, you naturally observe more. You notice subtle expressions, changes in tone, and contradictions between words and behavior. While others rush to fill every moment of silence, you quietly collect information that helps you understand the true nature of a situation. The loudest voice in the room is not always the strongest. More often, genuine strength belongs to the individual who listens carefully, thinks deeply, and chooses their words with intention rather than impulse. Silence becomes especially powerful during conflict. Imagine someone trying to provoke you into an argument. They expect immediate anger, defensive explanations, or emotional reactions because those responses make you predictable. But when you remain calm, pause before speaking, and refuse to react impulsively, the entire situation changes. Instead of giving them control over your emotions, you force them to confront the silence they created. That silence often becomes more uncomfortable than any argument could have been. It removes the emotional reward they were seeking and allows you to respond from reason instead of frustration. Calm restraint is not weakness. It is evidence that your decisions are directed by purpose rather than by temporary emotion. This lesson also applies to your personal ambitions. Many people announce every goal before taking the first meaningful step. They seek encouragement instead of progress, confusing public excitement with genuine achievement. Yet every time a plan is shared too early, it becomes vulnerable to unnecessary opinions, doubts, and distractions. Strategic individuals understand that results create stronger impressions than promises ever can. They prefer to work quietly, allowing consistent action to build credibility instead of relying on impressive declarations. When success finally becomes visible, it requires no explanation because the evidence speaks for itself. Another advantage of thoughtful silence is that it protects your independence. The more opinions you invite into every decision, the more difficult it becomes to hear your own judgment. Advice can be valuable, but too many voices create confusion. Intelligent people know when to listen, when to reflect, and when to trust their own reasoning. They are willing to learn from others without allowing every outside opinion to shape their direction. This balance creates confidence because their choices are based on careful consideration instead of constant approval. As you develop the discipline to speak with intention rather than habit, people begin responding to you differently. Your words carry greater weight because they are measured instead of impulsive. Your presence becomes calmer because you no longer feel compelled to explain every decision or defend every action. More importantly, you begin seeing how patience reveals truths that hurried conversations often hide. And once you master the quiet strength of silence, you are prepared for the next ruthless lesson, the art of setting unshakable boundaries, protecting your time, and becoming someone who cannot be easily manipulated or controlled. By now, you understand that dangerous intelligence is built through observation, emotional discipline, and purposeful silence. Yet none of these qualities can protect you if you allow other people unlimited access to your time, attention, and energy. The fourth ruthless lesson is learning to establish boundaries that cannot be shaken by guilt, pressure, or manipulation. Many people spend their lives believing kindness means saying yes to every request, solving every problem, and making themselves endlessly available. At first, this behavior appears generous, but over time it produces exhaustion instead of respect. People begin treating your willingness to help as an obligation rather than a gift. The more consistently you sacrifice your own priorities, the more invisible your value becomes. Strategic intelligence begins when you understand that protecting your peace is not selfish. It is necessary if you expect to make wise decisions and live according to your principles, instead of other people's expectations. Ideas commonly associated with Machiavelli remind us that respect cannot be requested. It must be demonstrated through consistent behavior. Every time you compromise your values simply to avoid disappointing someone, you quietly teach them that your boundaries are negotiable. Manipulative individuals quickly recognize this pattern. They rely on guilt instead of honesty, urgency instead of reason, and emotional pressure instead of mutual respect. They know that a person who fears conflict will eventually surrender to it. But the moment you calmly refuse demands that violate your principles, the entire relationship changes. Those who genuinely respect you will understand your decision, while those who only benefited from your lack of boundaries may become uncomfortable. That discomfort reveals more about their intentions than any conversation ever could. One of the greatest mistakes people make is believing they must explain every refusal in detail. They provide lengthy justifications, hoping everyone will approve of their decision. Unfortunately, excessive explanations often invite negotiation rather than understanding. Every additional reason creates another opportunity for someone to argue against it. Sometimes, a respectful and confident response is enough. You do not need to apologize for protecting your time, your focus, or your emotional well-being. A simple decision delivered with calm confidence often carries far greater authority than a complicated defense filled with uncertainty. The less desperate you are for approval, the stronger your decisions become. Boundaries also shape the way you invest your energy. Every day presents countless distractions disguised as opportunities. Some conversations drain your focus without offering anything meaningful in return. Some relationships demand endless effort while giving little respect or appreciation. Some commitments consume valuable time, but move you no closer to the future you hope to create. Dangerous intelligence requires learning the difference between movement and progress. Being busy does not guarantee you are moving in the right direction. Strategic individuals regularly ask themselves whether their actions support their long-term goals or merely satisfy temporary expectations placed upon them by others. This simple habit prevents them from becoming trapped in lives designed by someone else's priorities. As your boundaries become stronger, your confidence changes in subtle but powerful ways. You stop feeling responsible for every person's opinion, every disappointment, and every misunderstanding. You recognize that not everyone will agree with your decisions, and that is perfectly acceptable. True confidence is not measured by universal approval, but by the ability to remain faithful to your values despite disagreement. Ironically, people often begin respecting you more once they realize your principles cannot be easily influenced by guilt or emotional pressure. Consistency earns trust far more effectively than constant accommodation ever could. Eventually, you discover that the strongest boundaries are not built to keep people away. They exist to protect what matters most: your integrity, your purpose, and your peace of mind. When these foundations remain secure, outside pressure loses much of its influence. You become calmer because your direction no longer depends on pleasing everyone around you. And with that inner stability established, you are prepared for the final ruthless lesson, where all the principles you have learned come together to create a life guided by wisdom, resilience, and lasting self-mastery, rather than by fear, approval, or circumstance. Every lesson you have learned leads to one final realization. Dangerous intelligence is not about becoming feared, mysterious, or emotionally distant. It is about becoming so disciplined that your decisions are no longer controlled by fear, anger, pride, or the opinions of other people. Many spend their lives searching for power in wealth, status, or authority, believing those things will finally make them untouchable. Yet history repeatedly proves that people with enormous influence often collapse because they never learn to govern themselves. External success without inner discipline is fragile. It disappears the moment circumstances change. True strength is different. It is built quietly through daily choices that no one applauds. It is the ability to remain calm during chaos, patient during uncertainty, and faithful to your principles when compromise appears easier. This is the highest form of intelligence because it cannot be stolen, purchased, or manipulated. Once it becomes part of your character, every challenge becomes an opportunity to strengthen it rather than a reason to abandon it. Ideas commonly associated with Machiavelli suggest that lasting influence belongs to those who understand reality without becoming prisoners of it. They recognize that deception exists, but they do not become deceitful. They understand that betrayal is possible, yet they refuse to let bitterness define their future. They accept that the world is imperfect, but they continue acting with wisdom instead of resentment. This balance separates truly strategic individuals from those who merely imitate confidence. Anyone can appear strong when life is easy. Character reveals itself only when comfort disappears. The disciplined mind does not panic when circumstances change, because it has already learned that control begins within rather than outside. The final ruthless lesson is to become impossible to manipulate by refusing to surrender your identity. Many people slowly lose themselves while trying to satisfy expectations that never truly belong to them. They change their values to gain acceptance, silence their beliefs to avoid criticism, and chase recognition that never provides lasting satisfaction. Eventually, they wake up feeling successful by society's standards, but disconnected from the person they once hoped to become. Dangerous intelligence rejects this trap. It reminds you that approval earned by abandoning your principles is not success. It is dependence wearing the disguise of achievement. Freedom begins the moment your actions reflect your convictions instead of your desire to impress others. This transformation also changes the way you define victory. Winning is no longer about proving someone wrong, having the final word, or collecting admiration from strangers. Real victory is maintaining clarity when emotions invite confusion. It is choosing patience when anger promises satisfaction. It is protecting your integrity when shortcuts appear tempting. Every time you choose discipline over impulse, you strengthen a foundation that becomes harder to shake with every passing challenge. The habits you build during ordinary days become the source of extraordinary resilience during difficult ones. As these lessons become part of your daily life, people begin noticing something they cannot easily explain. You no longer seem desperate for attention, approval, or validation. You listen more carefully, react less impulsively, and make decisions with quiet confidence. Your presence becomes steady because it is rooted in principles instead of circumstances. Ironically, this calm independence often attracts the respect that endless effort to impress others never could. Influence arrives naturally because people trust those who demonstrate consistency under pressure. They recognize that your confidence does not depend on applause, and that makes your words and actions far more meaningful. In the end, the greatest lesson is surprisingly simple. The smartest person is not the one who knows the most secrets about other people, but the one who understands themselves deeply enough to remain unshaken by changing circumstances. Master your emotions before they master you. Guard your principles before convenience weakens them. Observe patiently before acting. Speak with purpose rather than impulse, and protect your peace without losing your compassion. When these habits become your way of life, you no longer need to chase power because true power already exists within your character. That is what makes someone dangerously smart, not their ability to control the world around them, but their unwavering ability to control themselves, regardless of what the world chooses to do.